Yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with coming in the mood with a little bhajan. Om Atma Jyoti Namo Paramatma Jyoti Namo Paripurana Jyoti Namo Saravatama Jyoti Namo Antara Jyoti Namo Sri Sadguru Jyoti Namo. Right. Look, can I see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about the distinction between dhāranā, or concentration, and what is the ultimate goal of yoga, which is silent, objectless meditation. Next page, please. So what is the final goal of yoga? Now, mind you, very many people are not interested in this question. You see, they find that practicing yoga does them good, especially good for health, against stress, against high blood pressure, and they don't need anything more. They are not asking for anything more, and that's fine. In fact, that can even be a choice of principle. Like the modern attitude to yoga among most practitioners is a bit like, and sorry for making a rather highbrow comparison, it's a bit like among the Chinese public in the 11th, 12th century, when you had a movement called Neo-Confucianism. So many people in Chinese officialdom were Confucians, and among other things, that meant that they felt responsible towards society, but also that they were rather skeptical of religion, and especially of what they called the superstitious claims of Buddhism, like belief in reincarnation. You see, they had no use for all this. However, they saw that the meditation that Buddhists practiced, that this was a good thing. So they adopted the practice of meditation. Every morning they would sit in meditation for like an hour in what they called Jingzuo, pure sitting, maybe better known under the Japanese name Seiza. And so that was a form of tuning their instrument in order to be better ready to face the day and to practice their responsible tasks. They would practice meditation, not for any metaphysical purpose, but simply to be in shape. And so that's how most people today also see yoga. So what Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra gives us the ultimate goal of yoga may not interest most people, even practitioners of yoga. But since you have gathered here, I dare assume that you people are somewhat interested. And in that case, you will also know the opening verses of the Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, who defines yoga as follows. Yoga is stopping the motions of the mind. Then the seer rests in his own form. Otherwise, he identifies with the motions of the mind. This is a somewhat more elaborate, more technical definition of the very first definition of yoga that we have in writing, namely in the Kathopanishad. It is said that yoga is closing the senses and silencing the thoughts, stilling the mind. So it's not a very ambitious definition. It doesn't say what yoga is for. It doesn't want to take you anywhere specific with yoga. It simply says it's silencing the mind. And you see, you can do that, and then you can see what the effect is, and if it is worth continuing. And probably you will value it and you will continue it, or maybe you won't. In India, they don't make a problem of that. They say, well, it is ultimately karma. You know, it is what merit you have gathered in your past lives that determines whether today you will be sufficiently drawn towards yoga, or only ephemerally, or not at all. And so whatever is your case, it is fair, it is exactly what you need. You are at that stage, and so there's no worry about it. You are interested in yoga precisely in the doses that you deserve. So it is silencing the mind. Now, Patanjali does instrumentalize the technique of yoga for a certain spiritual goal. Namely, you overcome the usual identification of the mind, of consciousness, with the objects of consciousness. That is to say, most of the time, your consciousness is about something, is absorbed in a specific object. And so the goal of yoga is to stop being absorbed in these objects. So as long as you are focusing on something, whether it is a dream or a waking experience or an imagination or a memory, you see, all those are not bad in themselves, but they are not the goal of yoga. So the Yoga Sutra in the next verses immediately enumerates what the possible objects of consciousness are. They are 5 in number: sleep, the most tamasic, the most inertial form of consciousness. Then knowledge, in the sense of real knowledge. You see, being alert, being awake to the realities around you. Then false knowledge, illusory knowledge, which may take the form of hallucinations, or, you know, just being wrongly informed, drawing the wrong inferences from what you correctly observe. So you have true knowledge and false knowledge. That's 2 and 3. Then you have memory, being with your mind concentrated on events from the past. And you have imagination, concentrating on any possible course of events in the future, whether it is going to take place or not, but right now you can imagine it. So these are the 5 possible motions of the mind. And so every content of mental activity that you can possibly think of falls under one of these 5 headers. So even if you concentrate on something mentally and you do it very yogically, very one-pointedly, ultimately you could say, if you apply Patanjali very rigorously, you could say, well, even that is a motion of the mind. Even that is one of the 5 types of distraction. And so the ultimate goal laid down in the Yoga Sutra goes beyond any of these 5 objects of concentration and wants you to focus on consciousness itself, the consciousness resting in itself, not being absorbed in any of its possible objects. However, that is easier said than done. And next page. So the first stages of yoga, I don't need to reiterate them except extremely briefly. You have the yamas, the rules for a correct behavior vis-a-vis the world around you. The niyamas, the 5 rules of behavior in leading your own life, in your attitude towards yourself. Then you have asana, the correct posture. Pranayama, the breath control. Pratyahara, withdrawing the senses. And then you come to where we have to be today, dhāranā. Dhāranā, usually translated as concentration, as focus, is defined in the Yoga Sutra as limiting the mind to one area, to one place. It comes from a verb meaning to hold fast, to fix. And so it is the effort of confining the mind to one precise object. Which are these dhāranas? Well, pretty much any object you can think of can serve as an object of concentration. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, the Shiva book of knowledge. Bhairava is Shiva. Bhairava means the terrible one, the ferocious one, the fearsome one. And it's in fact a synonym of Rudra, which is the original name of Shiva, because Shiva is in fact a flattering name. Is, you know, if I may use a difficult word, an apotropaic flattery name, namely to ward off the danger inherent in Rudra or Shiva. And because Shiva is the fierce god, yoga is a fierce thing. It is saying no to the usual temptations of the world. In that sense, it is a big no saying, is a big rejection or refutation of the worldly temptations. And so in that sense, it is terrible. And you see, if a dictator is terrible, then you have every interest in flattering him. So Rudra, meaning the shouter, the crier, or Bhairava, the fearsome one, is flattered by being called Shiva. Shiva means good. Like in the expression, Satyam Shivam Sundaram, and the good, the true, and the beautiful. You have the expression in Greek, but you also have it in Sanskrit. The true, the good, and the beautiful. So the good is Shiva. Okay. Anyway, so a book named after him, in which he explains a number of things about yoga to his wife, Parvati. There he mentions 112 dhāranas. So sometimes you hear Hindus proudly say, yeah, you know, we have 112 dhāranas. Well, in fact, they have many more. You see, the 112 are a selection, a fairly random selection. You know, you could have many more. Like, for instance, a very common object of concentration in India is the mantra. Mantra means a mental instrument, a mind instrument. It's originally the name of one of the verses of the Rig Veda. Every verse of the Veda is called a mantra. But so it is now used for every sentence that is taken in the mind and then repeated 108 times or a multiple of that. And it can be a traditional mantra. There are a number of verses from the Upanishads or so that are taken separately and used as a mantra. Like, for instance, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma, I am the Absolute. Yes, a very famous one is Soham, So Aham, right? So means he or that, and Aham means me. And so the phrase Soham means I am that. And it comes from a full sentence in the Yajurveda, where it says, he who lives in the sun, the personified sun, the sun god, him am I. I am the same as he up there in the sun. So that Soham is a very commonly used mantra. Many mantras are secret. The traditional mantras are deemed to have a specific effect. So you have different mantras depending on what your needs are according to the judgment of the guru who confers this mantra to you. But you can also use an improvised mantra. And in fact, there has been a lot of Western research into the effects of meditation. And in a famous experiment, you see, they didn't want to use any religious sounding mantra because, you know, Western scientific oriented people, you know, dislike religion. So they took just a neutral word, one. And it turns out that the effects that are ascribed to meditation, like if you're becoming calmer, lower blood pressure, a slower heart rate, you know, objective measurable things, that these are indeed improved by such a neutral mantra. Nevertheless, traditionalists will shrug at this and prefer the traditional mantras because they are meaningful. In teachings about mantras, this is often emphasized that you should choose a mantra that is meaningful to you. Then another object of meditation is body parts, like the crown of the head, the third eye, the tip of the nose, any hand gesture or mudra, then the point below the navel, the nadis or energy channels. There is a medieval textbook about yoga called the Yoga Yajnavalkya that gives a description of the 14 principal nadis or energy channels. And the best known energy channel is the channel in the spine, where supposedly the Kundalini energy can rise through that channel from the root point, the perineum, to the crown of the head. So in any of these body parts, or the heart, yes, since we're talking about Hridaya as the theme in Zinal, the heart is also a very important place where you can concentrate on. Or you have imagined objects. You can use your imagination to take an object of the imagination and concentrate on that. Like, for instance, there is the space around you. This is called the Akasha Bhavana, the sensing of the space. And that's not entirely synonymous with emptiness. Space is something with a dimension, you know. It is larger than zero. So it's not entirely the same as emptiness. And it's something that you can feel. Or you can take, you know, a very simple thing is to take a color, you know, close your eyes and see red. No, not a little bit of red, an ocean of red, nothing but red. It's a very simple exercise. Anybody can try it. Or you can take a far more demanding visualization. This is what you have in Tantra, where you picture in your mind a deity, where you have the whole description of a deity. You see, the Ganesha, for example, has 4 arms. He is standing on a rat. He has these 4 objects in each of his hands. You know, he has a pot belly and he has an elephant trunk and so on. So you try to imagine this entire description of the Murti, of the visualization of the deity. And you concentrate on it fully 100%. And ultimately in Tantra, the idea is that you totally identify with it. You become this deity. Or you can concentrate on any virtue, like karuna, compassion, or on any mood. You see, you can approach a deity in different moods. You can be like a child yearning for its mother, or you can be like a lover desiring his beloved. You know, there are a number of different attitudes possible. You know, these attitudes can also be the object of concentration. Next. Yes. So then the next 2 stages that are described in the Yoga Sutra are in fact a continuation of this dhāranā, an intensification of this dhāranā. In the beginning, when you concentrate, you have to make an effort. You have to force yourself to stay with this object. When you become used to it, when you become firmly established in this practice, then this concentration will start to go automatically. You get an uninterrupted stream of consciousness to the area that you've chosen for concentration. This is called dhyāna. Dhyāna is quite an important word because this is actually the word for meditation. So dhyāna is a derivative of the root dhi, which means attention or mind. The word is among the, let's say, non-yoga practicing people, perhaps best known in the Japanese form Zen, which is a Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese word Chan, which itself is a Chinese pronunciation of dhyāna. So, so this meditation has reached the West through different avenues. One of these is Japanese Zen. So after the Second World War, these Japanese influences came to the West and gained fast popularity. So, and the interesting thing about the Japanese form is that that became known purely as a form of meditation, nothing but meditation. Whereas in the yoga system, you get a whole lot of preparatory practices. And so many people who start these practices lose sight of the ultimate target of meditation. And so yoga has, in colloquial usage, you know, a more general meaning than just meditation. So the stage of meditation is ultimately the same as concentration, except that it goes effortlessly. And so you get a natural identification with the object of concentration. And when that becomes a stable state of the mind, it is called samadhi. Samadhi, again, has the same root, dhi, attention. And the prefix a means directed towards. So it is a concentrated attention, one-pointed attention, bundled attention. And sam also, the prefix sam reinforces this. It means, sam means altogether, means convergence. You will see in one of the lesser known parts of the Yoga Sutra that great powers or great effects are ascribed to samadhi. So if you really concentrate on an object, you can penetrate that object. You can have a very much deeper consciousness of it than you have in ordinary non-concentrated dealings with objects of consciousness. Like, for example, it is said that if you concentrate on a person's body language, you can perceive his ultimate motives. In fact, that's something you do in daily life, but much less intense. But you already have the sense that you can know someone by just observing him. To some extent, you see, you know more than whatever he has to say. You know, just by concentrating on him, you can already feel something of what he is about. So in samadhi, this goes very far. And so you have all these tall claims about samadhi that, you know, if you can watch the moon or, you know, other objects, you can really penetrate into them and see what they have to say. Or for example, if you become aware within yourself of something that touches you, like for instance, you come to a specific place and you feel something special about that place, you feel touched by that place. Well, if you concentrate on the feeling you then get, the result will be, according to Patanjali, that you realize the impressions you have acquired in your past lives, and in particular, those impressions that link you to that specific place that gave you those first impressions. Anyway, so dhāranā, dhyana, samadhi gives a very deep knowledge of that, what it is you concentrate on. Then Patanjali also goes into the details of the different stages of samadhi, where he makes a distinction between the earlier stage where you still have a sort of object consciousness, where there is still a difference between yourself as the perceiver and the object as the perceived. And so then you transcend that difference. Which means that the object becomes less and less an object, and that which fills your mind is less the object than your consciousness of the object. And there, at long last, you approach the goal of yoga, which is that the consciousness rests in itself. Now, that may sound like something still far out of reach, that we, you know, plodding through the first steps of yoga can only dream of, but I don't think so. You see, to stabilize this kind of consciousness, that takes years of yogic effort. But nevertheless, all that you work with in yoga is your consciousness, which is there all the time. And so you have kind of samadhi experiences quite regularly when you fully concentrate on something. And you see, often things catch our attention. And so sometimes spontaneously you really concentrate on something. And some of the effects that are described by Patanjali already happen. So most people have some little experience already of samadhi, even if they're not accomplished yogis yet. So what you ultimately reach is kaivalya. Kaivalya means isolation. That means isolation of consciousness from its objects. Usually consciousness is absorbed in the perceptions, the observations you usually have, the dreams you have, the imagination you entertain, or the memories you go into. And so you isolate consciousness from all that. You pull it out of these entanglements. That's ultimately the goal of yoga. But so this is hard to do. I propose we try. So I would like you all to sit up straight and ultimately slowly to close your eyes. There's nothing special you have to do with breath, just a normal, calm, relaxed breath. And now we're going to think of nothing. We're going to make the mind totally empty. And when you catch your mind entertaining a thought, then you let go of that thought. Now, before you know it, some thought will have caught you from behind, and you suddenly find yourself making your little program for tomorrow, or thinking of a conversation you had earlier today, thinking about, oh, I should have said this. Well, okay, you notice this and you let it go. Thinking of nothing is quite easy. You don't have to do anything for it. But if nonetheless you catch yourself thinking of this or of that, no matter. The fact that you realize you're thinking of something is already great progress compared to the usual situation where you are caught up in thoughts one after another and not realizing it. So we don't imagine ourselves lying on a beach. We don't imagine seeing a pink elephant. Our mind is just empty. What is a yogi? A yogi is someone who sits down, closes his eyes, and thinks of nothing. Now slowly Come back down. Slowly open your eyes. Come back to everyday life. So this was a very, very short first taste of objectless meditation. I expect that in most people, the project of thinking of nothing has been interrupted quite a few times by thoughts of this or that or the other. And so if you try for this, you will perhaps be grateful to all the gurus or to the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra when they advise you a number of objects of concentration, because it's far easier to concentrate on one thing than to concentrate on nothing. And so in the early stages of yoga, what you usually do is to concentrate on the breath, for example, or a mantra, for example. So I propose we do this just to sense the contrast. A very common mantra that we will now use is so. So on the in breath, so, on the out breath, so we do this 108 times. I will keep count, so you don't have to worry about anything. Concentrate on this mantra, and so when the number is up, I will signal to come down again. So, so. Je kunt je langzaam de ogen terug openen. Ik neem aan dat de meesten van u dit een heel wat eenvoudiger oefening vonden dan zich helemaal op niets te concentreren. Zo één ding waar
Maybe in English. Koenraad, maybe in English.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. So I assume most of you have found this concentration on Soham a lot easier to do and to maintain, especially, than to concentrate on nothing. You know, concentrating on nothing is a bit of a hopeless fight. And so if you have first stabilized the mind by concentrating on one thing, then in the next stage, it becomes more feasible to just let go and enter the state of emptiness. I propose we have time for that. I propose we do one more of these concentration exercises. It's a very, very well-known one, namely to concentrate on the third eye. This is one of the exercises directed on one of the body parts. So here again, you in a moment you close the eyes and you concentrate on the third eye. It is called in Sanskrit the Shambhavi mudra. Shambhavi is a derivative of Shambhu, which is one of the names of Shiva, meaning the calm one, the unaffected one, the quiet one, the peaceful one. So we do this Shambhavi mudra. Mudra in this case is not a movement of the hands, but specifically of concentration. You can emphasize it physically by turning the eyes upwards, but you don't need to do that. It's the attention that has to go upwards to the third eye. So let's try this for a few minutes. Please close your eyes. Let go of all the other tensions. Quieten down the whole body. And then turn the attention upwards to the space between the eyebrows. And what is usually called the third eye. Closing the eyes is usually helpful for concentration. Makes it easier to forget all the rest. In this case, it is hardly even necessary. You see, even if with the eyes open, but concentrated on the third eye is fairly unusual, and that makes it easier to maintain this concentration. Because letting go of it immediately brings you in the ordinary state. And then that reminds you, oh, I was doing something else. I was concentrating on the third eye. So even with the eyes open, it is possible. But so the point is to concentrate on the third eye. Now you slowly let go of the object of the third eye. Come back to the usual attitude. Relax all over and sense what the effect is of this concentration. So we can conclude that you should not underestimate dhāranā. It is not the ultimate stage of yoga, but it is a very feasible practice that lifts you up from the ordinary. That very much sets you in a mood for yoga and for further steps of yoga. So this was in fact a very elementary exercise to make that distinction, to sense, to feel, to be aware of this distinction between concentration as a relatively easy exercise and meditation as already a fairly advanced stage of yoga. But so the two are continuous with one another. There is no rupture between the two. I propose we do three times Om just to finish the formal part of this session. So if anyone has any comments or questions or so, I would like to hear them, and I suppose we all would like to hear them. So please, the microphone is yours. Everybody satisfied? That's fine.
For me, the objectless meditation was the most easiest. I found it easier than the concentration on objects. Maybe it's because during some years I have practiced Zen, and there we often meditate the shikantazi, which means just sitting, no special concentration.
Yeah, exactly, just sitting. Long ago, I did Aikido, Japanese martial arts, and we went to summer school, a whole week of nothing but training. And every morning we started with Zazen, sitting meditation. And so our teacher, Kanetsuka sensei, explained, you know, people asked him, what is the use of Zazen? And so he said, well, Bodhidharma, the Buddhist monk, he came from India. He went to China to the Shaolin monastery. And one day he was invited to the court of the Emperor of China. And the Emperor asked him, what's the use of Zazen? And Bodhidharma said, no use. So Kanetsuka sensei said, you see, I don't do Zazen to achieve anything. I just sit. And maybe that's the secret. I just read one of the many translations of the Yoga Sutras, one by Alan Finger. And so it says at the beginning that what yoga is staying in the now, in the here and now. And, you know, that's a good way of putting it, because if you're thinking of something, you are likely thinking of either something that has been living in the past, or of something that you want to do in the future, imagination. And so either way, you're distracted away from the here and now. And so meditation is just letting go of all these interests in past and future and staying in the here and now.
Can you repeat the name of this person who translated the Yoga Sutra?
Yeah, this is Alan Finger, finger like a finger.
Okay, yes, thanks. Some other questions. John.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Dr. Elst, I'm thinking, it's just in order to put a question to you, could it be perhaps that as human beings, we both need both possibilities, namely thinking and not thinking? This came to my mind while, I'm completely with you, and what you shared with us tonight is very great, and is based on timeless wisdom and experience from yogis. But isn't it a fact that humans have this quite unique asset of being able to think? I think that distinguishes us from most animals. And if we would say that animals also have thoughts, I don't know, they might have less, or they might be less complex. So on the one hand, being able to think, having this thinking mind is a tool that allows to, bring about writing books or putting order in your thoughts in trying to understand the world. But on the other hand, thoughts in most people are restless, and we want to get rid of the restlessness. But I'm somewhat puzzled by the ultimate aim of how we formulated that as human beings. The ultimate is to stop thinking. But then, of course, we retreat after a samadhi if we can achieve it. And I guess that the brain will continue thinking. So it's an open question. I'm amazed.
Yes, well, okay, let's compare with the animals. It is said in scripture, in Buddhism, in the Upanishads and everywhere, that it is very, very desirable, very valuable to be born as a human being, because that enables you far more to do yoga. It is just something like, admit this sort of naughty sidestep. In some religious scriptures, it is also said that it is desirable to be born as a high caste person in a peaceful, prosperous country, as a man rather than a woman, because as a man you can concentrate more, you can dispose of your own time, whereas a woman is more a slave of circumstances, of the needs of the children and so on. So this is not a Jain conception. They think women are more naturally spiritual, but in Buddhism, you have the idea that men are more naturally spiritual. Anyway, but so there are a number of natural conditions that favor sadhana, favor the yogic project. And so one of these is being human, as opposed to being animal. Nevertheless, as I said before, even during your ordinary functioning in the daytime, sometimes you have some natural glimpse of samadhi. Now, this is true for animals as well. You see, if you look at animals, maybe you never see them actually practicing yoga, but nevertheless, sometimes they just sit there doing nothing. And apparently, for as far as we can tell, thinking of nothing. You know, they are just meditating. One of my own yoga teachers, Yoga Muni, or Marcel Mertens, he was also a great animal lover. And so this is the way he described it. You see, he could far better than I can describe the behavior of animals. And so he said, you see, at sometimes in the day, you know, my dog is doing nothing, just staring blank, you know, into space. He's meditating. Now, you see, maybe that's not an unfair description. So you see, they don't have a conception of what yoga is for, but nevertheless, they may be doing yoga sometimes in spite of themselves. And so, so you see, this practicing yoga is not a retreat into the animal kingdom, but still sometimes we do have certain things in common with animals. I mean, human beings are a more evolved stage, but you see that originates in the animal stage, and so much of it is in common. Like, for instance, as human beings, we can feel compassion. We can feel a certain, you know, ethic obligation to our fellow man. Now, in animals, this is already present, not fully, and not in all species and so on, but we see it coming up. You see the way elephants behave with each other, for instance, certain types of monkeys and so on, are already in that direction. And so in terms of yogic consciousness is the same thing. You see, when mankind, you know, made the step from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom at some point in the past, you know, he didn't start from scratch. You see, some elements of yogic consciousness were already present in any lower species that is conscious. Because you see, consciousness is not something you can divide. Consciousness is just consciousness, and animals already have it.
Mhm.
And so you see that they stumble upon, you know, a calm meditative state of consciousness that's bound to happen once in a while.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Somebody else?
You know, the translation you used from Alan Finger about the yoga is to be in the here and now, and we were just talking about animals.
Yeah.
Well, most animals are far more in the here and now than us humans are. So maybe they're the advanced species and not us.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
well,
we have to do a lot of work to get where they naturally are. So
yes. Well, you see, if you manage to remember your past lives, you know, probably you have already spent a lot of lives in some or other animal species. So you can tell us. I mean, any one of us, of course, can also achieve this. Yes.
But thank you, though. That was a really nice experience to compare the various focuses on nothing on something and something else, just to see how it feels and compare, compare and contrast. It's very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, there is a story about how people can get mistaken. You know, if people are seemingly thinking of nothing, it's not really necessary that they are really thinking of nothing. It's not a very serious story, but nevertheless, it has a realistic value. It's a story about a sweeper. You see someone who does the dirty work, cleaning lavatories and stuff. And he worked in the royal palace. And so, you see, the toilets were on the ground floor and the droppings fell downstairs in the cellar. And that's where the sweeper was working to keep everything clean. And so one day he was working in the cellar and he saw someone up there on the toilet seat. It was the queen, and he saw her buttocks, and they were so beautiful, and he was so attracted. And he went home, he couldn't think of anything else. He told his wife what he had seen, and she said, you know, women are so realistic. She said, you know, don't get any ideas. I mean, you are only a sweeper and she's the queen, forget about her. But he couldn't forget about her. So he went to sit down under a tree in the shadow, and he closed his eyes and he could see only one thing before him. He was totally concentrated, like we should all aspire to be when we sit down for yoga, so concentrated. And he was sitting there for days and days and days and not eating, not drinking, just only thinking of this fascinating sight. And then people started coming to him and hanging flowers around his neck and praying to him and so, wow, this is a yogi, he thinks of nothing. Until one day, even the queen came there to offer him a garland of flowers. Oh, this great yogi thinks of nothing. See, that's how people can be mistaken. I mean, maybe the guy was happy, you know, I don't begrudge that, you know, but anyway, I mean, that's not the highest possible thing you can do in yoga. But so, yeah, I mean, it is a very common thing that you know, the state of yoga is mistaken for, and this happens all the time, people run after gurus who sometimes have achieved something, have achieved some higher state, some concentration, have achieved some vision. And then rather than taking this as an encouragement to go on, to do more sadhana, to practice more seriously yoga, instead they think, oh, now I have it. And they set themselves up as teachers and they, you know, start to give themselves airs. Well, you see, that's something we have to be wary of all the time. You know, most of the road stretches far ahead of us.
I just wanted to say thank you. It's always inspiring and with both feet on the ground, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You are from Germany, I suppose.
Yeah, Hamburg.
Okay.
But I don't live in Hamburg now. But
Okay. Pleased to meet. Aapse milker mujhe prasanata hui. This is Hindi for pleased to meet you.
Danke, gleichfalls.
Okay, no more questions? Then we will wind up here. It's an hour and a half. That's a good time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koenraad Elst, about the interesting introduction and the meditations we did together and the talk after question and answers. Unfortunately, it's the last one. The last one you that you will join with us. But I think you are ready to participate on the final session about the core of spirituality.
I am absolutely ready. Yes.
I thought I had read it. So thank you very much. Thank you, all of you participants too. And don't forget to look at the website of the European Yoga Union to see what the other sessions about spirituality are.
Namaste.
Namaste. Oké, Koenraad, dank u wel. Dat was weer al fijn.
Ja, absoluut.
Goed, dan zijn er nog een paar chats. Een chat, many thanks, much appreciated. Voilà. Oké.
Yes.
Dan is tot een volgende gelegenheid.
Ja, en je hebt dus nog mijn verslag te goed van Maréchal.
Ja, dat komt wel in orde. Was dat eigenlijk voor de dingen, voor de nieuwsbrief of zo?
Ja, een deadline zou wel nuttig zijn om mij aan te sporen om het klaar te krijgen.
Ah ja. Maar ik geloof dat Fabienne dat opvolgt zeker, hè?
Ja, inderdaad.
Hij had het u gevraagd waarschijnlijk.
Ja,
oké.
Oké dan.
Goed.
Tot de volgende.
Tot de volgende. Goedenavond, Koenraad. Bedankt.